Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Isaac Wiebe. I'm a graduate student at Carleton University. Today, I would like to demonstrate how to set up wireless communication between a ground control station, aka my MacBook Air, and this drone here. The application we'll be using for the ground control station is known as QGroundControl, and it can interface well with the drone via Wi-Fi connection. So let's get started from top down. So the first thing we want to do is we want to enable the Pixhawk controller. This is an autopilot controller that we need to connect to our ground control station. We can see the autopilot controller kind of in here. You can see the USB port of it if you look close enough. So in order to power this up, we're going to switch on the LiPo battery, connecting the proper terminals here, like so. So you heard that chime earlier. That is known as the Pixhawk power on chime. So you can see now that our Pixhawk module is powered on. You can see there's some lights inside. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to start the communication from the ground control station here to the Pixhawk that is attached to this drone. So what we have to do now is we have to power on the Raspberry Pi. So the Raspberry Pi right now is receiving power from an external power source known as Pi Juice. So all we need to do to turn it on is just simply press this first button on switch 1 here. It's a little blurry, you might not be able to see it, but it's the furthest switch that's kind of closest to us. So in order to reach here, let's take a plastic pen and just flick it on. Flick it on like that. And there we go. So all you need is a little press, no more, no less. You can see now that the Raspberry Pi itself is powered on. So when the Raspberry Pi fully boots, we'll see here that this wireless adapter that's attached to this drone will eventually be active, and this will be the network that we're trying to communicate through to connect to the drone. The network is connected via USB to the Raspberry Pi, and once the messages are sent through wireless communication, we'll transmit the messages to the Pixhawk using the serial port here. So we see here that the black wire is connected to the proper ground wire on the Pi Juice hat. This is the same mapping to the Raspberry Pi, and the TX and RX wires are also properly connected. This is connected to the TLM1 port on the Pixhawk. The baud rate of the TLM1 port can be set manually through QGroundControl. By default, it is 576000. So that's the baud rate where we're going to be communicating our messages at. So now let's start QGroundControl on the host machine. So QGroundControl is over here. Might take some time because I'm loading it from the disk image. So bear with me. Let's see here, it's loading up slowly. Maybe if I wait a little longer, it will boot up. Okay. Unfortunately, I opened it wrong. I need to open it using special permissions. So I'm just going to set the camera down and open it using control click. So that way I can enable my password to open it, which I will. So I click control click. And now we're booting up slowly. Maybe if I try again, it'll be faster. It's usually faster. Oh, here we go. Okay, perfect. So we see the default QGroundControl interface here. QGroundControl asks us for our default location usually. I can't see ourselves located on the map here, so that might be a bit of a problem. Nevertheless, you can see here the status is disconnected. So in order to connect, we have to go through the following steps. So we click on this giant Q here, then application settings, and now we have various menus. So the first thing we want to do is we want to enable Mavlink forwarding. So we go into Mavlink here and we check off this box, enable Mavlink forwarding. And then we'd have to know the host, we'd have to know our Raspberry Pi host and port number. So it is indeed 192.168.8.100. And then the standard UDP port for communications is 14550. So if I am connected to here, if I connect to the Raspberry Pi's Wi-Fi, then I should be able to connect. Okay, so now I'm connected to the Raspberry Pi, but right now there's no active connection right now. So now what I need to do is secure shell into the Pi. Okay, so I type in SSH pi at pi.local. I enter the default password, which is Raspberry. And now here I am. Now what I want to do is I want to load up the Mav Proxy shell. So what I'll do is I'll open my list of bash scripts that I have worked out that opens this. So I go in here. Alrighty. Here's the Mav Proxy script. All right. So the command to run Mav Proxy, well, first you'd have to install Mav Proxy on your Raspberry Pi, and there's many instructional videos of how to do that. But the command we'd want to run is mavproxy.py, and then we'd put in the master flag of UDP 192.168.8.100, port 14550. Notice that's the same port that we're forwarding to from QGroundControl. And then we're going to output these messages on serial or UART serial. And so the output will be on /dev/TTY capital S0. And then it's very important to specify the default baud rate. We set a comma and then 57600. That's our default baud rate. So now if I click enter here.
Manual flight mode.
Perfect. So now if we go back to QGroundControl, we go back and it says not ready, which is a step up because initially it said disconnected. So now we have some sort of connection here. And this application now knows where we are, which is probably good. There's a few other menus that are important. As I mentioned earlier, how to set the baud rate. So you go into the vehicle setup menu. You would calibrate all your sensors here. Normally it's best practice to calibrate sensors while connected to USB rather than over the internet. So we can go to our parameters here. And the parameter that we want is SER_tel1 baud. Right, here it is. So it's by default set to 57600. And make sure to leave it at that if you want to communicate at that baud rate. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you connect the QGroundControl station or our ground control to our drone wirelessly. And just to prove to you the connection, I can move this laptop to the other side of the room, and provided that we're still connected via the same network, we should be able to use this without any difficulties. So we can still hop into the vehicle setup menu. Notice that in order to fly, there's a few, there's a pre-arm check that we must resolve first. But apart from that, this is very sound. Furthermore, let's take a look at a trace, a Wireshark trace, just to see what's going on the network side, because that is very interesting. So we load up Wireshark. There's good old Wireshark. And we start, and